In any field there are laws, regulations, a course of actions to follow. But in art there are standards, a framework which the artist is free to follow, or not. However, out of this context, it must first know the standards it supports. In other words, the filmmaker has to know the rules before he breaks them. These are basic rules which we will discuss today, guidelines which make the filmmaker, who knows them, an artist when he voluntarily breaks them. Firstly, the framework, all that is visible in the image. Several shots used depending on what the filmmaker wants to show. Extreme wide shot, usually the first shot of a new scene to show the audience where the action is taking place. Second, wide shot, to focus on a part of the action or setting while retaining an overview. Long shot, help to discover the characters from head to toe. Medium shot, expressions become visible. Medium close shot, close up and extreme close up. The framing is not done randomly. These shot values have a specific purpose to enhance the story. Similarly, the composition of the picture is not random. As Edgar Degas said, nothing in art should resemble an accident, not even movement. The composition of the image is done by taking certain rules into account. The most important of all is the rule of thirds. By dividing the image into thirds in width and height, 4 lines of force and thus 9 areas in the image are created. These lines are used in the composition of the image and they help the filmmaker to direct the eyes of the viewer around the frame. In this scene of Once Upon a Time in the West, the skyline falls perfectly on the horizontal line of the first third top of the image. Each character is placed in a third of the image. The main character, played by Charles Bronson, a reduced sized image and sharing the central space with the most imposing villain in the picture. The image can also be cut diagonally, so that it guides the viewer. For example, in this scene of Citizen Kane, the father standing looking at the documents of the sale of his son that the mother signed, and in the middle of the diagonal we perceive the boy outside. The composition of this picture sums up the current action by one look.
Monsieur, quand le doigt montre le ciel, l'imbécile regarde le doigt.
Everything is important in the composition of the frame, even the space. Space is the place of the future or the past, leaving a space for a sudden action, a landscape or a character who will enter the frame. Space is also an actor of the composition. We do not waste space unnecessarily, only consciously. After framing and composition is set, think light. A basic technique for illuminating a character is 3-point lighting. The first and most important light is the key light. Like the name suggests, this light is vital when establishing the overall lighting for the scene. It should have the most intensity out of the 3 lights and should highlight the form and dimension of the subject. The key light is typically set up to the right of the camera at a 45-degree angle. Once the key light has been properly set up, then the fill light should be created. The fill light's purpose is to fill in the deep shadows that are inevitably cast onto the subject by the key light. The fill light is usually set up on the opposite side of the key light. The last spotlight used is the backlight. This has the least light intensity because it is typically placed directly behind the subject, facing the camera. The backlight's purpose is to add a very slight glow to the back of the character. However, the filmmaker can choose the mood he wants by manipulating the 3 lights. Scary, happy, mysterious, or even tragic. To play with contrasts and give a special mood to an image, there are also other techniques, such as high-key and low-key light. When using a high-key light, we note 2 things. First, the image is bright, needed to create an image high-key. Define the levels of exposure to high values, being careful not to overexpose the image. Secondly, lack of contrast. The effect of the light tones in the images can be seen in this scene from Harry Potter. High-key images brings positive emotions, like here in Alice in Wonderland, who has just arrived at the castle of the White Queen. The image's brightness represents calmness, kindness, and sense of security emanating from the White Queen. Conversely, the low-key images are darker. Black is the main color, and the contours are accentuated. Low-key images are notable for their contrasts, as in Catwoman. Contrasts underscore the sensuality and support the ambiguity between good and evil of the main character. The low-key image makes for a dramatic or tense atmosphere. Finally, the mise en scène, a French word literally meaning put on stage. The mise en scène is the arrangement of all the details that will make a banal scene an interesting scene. Makeup, costumes, actors' expressions, props, lights, decors, etc., etc., etc. In other words, mise en scène describes the stuff in the frame and the way it is shown and arranged. For example, in this scene of Alice in Wonderland, changing the makeup of Mad Hatter is gradually supporting the rise of his anger until he calms down again. The director is in charge of deciding what goes where, when and how. In some instances, the mise en scène is designed to evoke emotions that permeate the whole movie. For example, in the German expressionist film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, distorted shapes and claustrophobic scenery are implemented to disturb the audience and enhance the horror. These principles of filming are known by all filmmakers. But not all of them respect these principles because they know there is no art without artists. A perfect technician may never be an artist, while an artist may become a technician to improve on his art.